Welcome to the Darkstream. This was unscheduled tonight. I was actually planning to be on live or be on Gab TV, but we had some technical difficulties. The third-party app that we use, Lyrics, seemed to have done an update on us, which kind of messed things up. This is a shirt, you know. I have a mic. I've tried a mic. It actually made things worse. So, you know, I'll have to, you know, I should get a different mic eventually, perhaps. Yes, we know the volume's low. There's nothing you can do about it on an iPad, okay? There's no need to keep talking about it every single time. We know this. Anyhow, oh, for fuck's sake, this guy's talking about mines again. And then, look, next person, if you talk about mines, I'm just gonna block you, okay? This is not a means for you to advertise other stuff, okay? And so, I'm not interested in these distractions. You know, either we're gonna have a conversation and stuff, or you know, you're gonna spam stuff. You're just a spammer if you're throwing stuff up there trying to advocate for, I don't know, Girl Scout cookies or whatever else. So don't do that. It's ridiculous. Anyhow, I thought it was fascinating today to see that for the first time, the God Emperor actually went directly after the opposition media in a substantive manner. You know, it wasn't just symbolic. He could have done it right from the beginning. He could have done it immediately, but he gave them a chance. You know, he gave them a chance. He said, "Look, I think you're fake news. I think you're prone to lying. I think you're dishonest. I don't think you're covering us fairly." And what did they do? They just kept pointing and shrieking. I don't think that they forced his hand. I think that what we're seeing is that the moderates in the administration have been proved wrong. I have absolutely no doubt, you know, everybody who has been involved in any way in combating the left always has the same problem of dealing with the moderates who are on their side. And so the issue that you have, whenever you're dealing with it, I mean, it came up just today on the Castelia House blog. The folks, there are folks who are saying, I mean, Castelia House literally just had its best traffic month ever. You know, we've got all these great new bloggers who are there. Jeffro Johnson, the author of Appendix N, is doing a fantastic job running the blog. You know, I don't actually have anything to do with it. And we've actually had record traffic this month. It's actually, you know, yesterday we beat our all-time traffic record, so you know it's going great, and the content is fantastic. But the funny thing is, literally as we're hitting what is a new peak, then these people start saying, well, you know, you got to tone it down. You know, you're being too extreme. You know, you might be offending people. And I mean, I heard the same thing when we were doing, I heard the same thing when we were doing Sad Puppies. And, you know, that's what happened when, that's how Rabid Puppies ended up getting started, because basically I was not willing to back down. I was not willing to dial down. I just said, look, you know, you guys want to do your own thing. You guys want to reach out to the other side. You guys want to get the left involved. You know, you want to bring them in. That's what they did. And of course, what happened? They got stabbed in the back. They got betrayed. They got disavowed. You know, they did not understand. They do now. But they did not understand then that the left was never going to be reasonable. And that being reasonable, you know, the idea of the moderate, the idea of the cuck, the idea of the conservative is always that if you're just friendly, if you're just reasonable, then people will be reasonable back to you. And that is utter bullshit. It is utterly ridiculous. It never works that way. And so, the way that it works is exactly the opposite. The more pain you cause them, the harder you make it for them to maintain their equanimity in their delusion, the more likely they are to surrender to you, to suddenly start seeing the value in what you have to say, to suddenly become aware of how maybe you're respectful. I mean, look at how CPAC put Bannon on stage. He was persona non grata last year. He was the uninvited, and they were talking about how he's a Nazi. Now suddenly he's on stage, and they're saying, "Oh, we want to give you a standing ovation because you did such a great job in getting the God Emperor elected." Well, they didn't say God Emperor, but you know what I mean. Suddenly they're sucking up to him, and it's kind of like what Winston Churchill once said about the Germans. He said, "The Hun is always either at your feet or at your throat." And that is true of the SJWs, that is true of the left. Either you keep them at your feet and you kick them, or they're going to be going after your throat. And so no amount of reason and dialectic and being nice and being civil and all this sort of thing is going to help. Yeah, and like, here's what's going to happen. I mean, the criticism. All they have is the same thing that the left has. Well, we're going to exclude you and we're going to call you names. Well, so the fuck what? We don't want to be part of their organizations. I've never been to CPAC. I will never go to CPAC. I have no interest whatsoever in anything that a conservative political action group does, because a conservative political action group is a group of losers. Conservatives are, by definition, losers. Their entire ideology is totally defensive. It is incapable of victory. I don't hate conservatives. I feel sorry for them because they don't know that they can never win. They don't understand their own foundational principles. They don't even know what they are. They don't know their own history. They don't know their own traditions, and therefore they cannot even effectively defend them, much less go on the offensive and establish anything new. We've seen it for the past 40 years. We've seen it even longer. Conservatism, the history of conservatism, is one long retreat. And that's why I think that the God Emperor, even though he is not alt-right per se, even though you cannot reasonably call him a genuine nationalist, he's a civic nationalist. Even though that's true of him, he is still alt-right in spirit. He is still not a conservative in spirit, right? Because he's a fighter, because he wants to win, because he expects to win. And this is why conservatives hate winners, because they're not comfortable with winning. They're comfortable with losing with grace and style. That's what you always hear them say. You will always hear them say that they're concerned about the tone. They're concerned about being noble. They talk about principles. They love to talk about principles, but they have no idea what their principles supposedly are. And so that's why, you're right, Cuckservative is a perfect description of them. Because they are there to watch other parties screw their nation. They are cuckolds. And so, no, neither me nor John Red Eagle came up with the term. Someone else coined it. It was a guy coined it on Twitter a few months before that. And so, the thing is that, and that's why, I just laugh at the very idea that conservatives are going to take on the alt-right. They're not going to take us on. They're just going to get steamrolled by us. they're going to, thank you, glad to hear it. They're going to try to bring us in. And they're going to try to co-opt us. They're going to try to do what was done to the Tea Party. And they're going to, what you saw with Milo, the reason that they conspired with the left, they conspired with David Brock to take Milo down, is because Milo made it clear that he had no use for them. He wasn't going to play along. They were actually afraid, and some of them were afraid that if they did bring him in to CPAC, he would co-opt them. He would take it over. And so, that's why you will never see these guys. These guys talk a big game. Somebody said Ben Shapiro is cancer. He's not cancer. He's just feckless and wildly overrated. And so, the thing is that, and like that, it says Milo is unleashed. That's the thing that people don't realize, is that Milo was playing nice. Milo was willing to kind of play the game more or less. I'm not. I have no interest in being a media whore. I have no interest in getting a show on Fox television. I don't care about that stuff. I just like to write my books and play my games. Design my games. And so, the thing is that it's, and this is why the alt-right is powerful, because most of us don't care and don't want the trinkets and the glass beads that they they want to buy our obedience with. We're not interested in that. It's not a what are we interested in? We're interested in Western civilization. We would like to continue to live in Western civilization. We'd like liberty too. I'd like liberty too. But I don't want liberty as much as I want Western civilization. All I really want is to be able to live in the traditions of my Christian forebears. And I'd like flush toilets too. That would be nice. As far as, being able to, all the stuff that people are concerned about, whether it's pot legalization or transgender bathrooms or all that kind of stuff, that's all bullshit. You're not worrying about that sort of thing. I want Western civilization, and I want working advanced technology. And those things are severely at risk today. And so, the thing is that, we have to stop worrying and concerning ourselves and paying attention to all the bullshit. We have to stop assimilating and tolerating and being accommodating. Is Western civilization perfect? No, it's not. Can it be improved? I would assume so. But I do note that most of the people who claim to have been improving it for the past 200 years have actually been striking at the roots of it. They're sitting on the branches, sawing at the branch they're sitting on. And it's fine, it would be fine if it was just them. No, Europe is not a lost cause. I'm sorry, but I hear that from time to time from these clueless Americans. Americans don't know the first thing about Europe. There are more white people in Europe, a lot more than there are in the USA. There are far fewer non-Europeans in Europe than there are in the USA. The USA is in much, much worse shape. The thing that's so utterly stupid about the whole idea that, Europe is dead. Europe was occupied, Spain was occupied by Islam for 500 years, maybe closer to 700 actually. And it came back from that. You know, and also Europeans have segregated all of the invaders to a much greater, in the U.S. it's much harder to find Hispanics or Africans or Arabs or whatever. It's very, very easy in Europe. If you're out in France, if you're outside of the cities, you don't see a single Arab or African anywhere. When you go into the cities, it was kind of ironic. I was in Paris at the Giardino Nelson Mandela, and they were standing. Again, you guys don't know what the hell you're talking about. Of course they can identify the threat. You guys listen to like 2 people interviewed on the streets of Sweden and go, oh, Europeans don't understand that they're a threat. Did you understand that in Germany alone, over 500 shelters were torched? Arson? How many refugee shelters have been torched by Americans in the USA? Do you remember a guy named Anders Breivik? There's a lot more resistance to the invasion in Europe than there is in the USA. And in the USA, you're in much worse shape because you have 80 million immigrants, second-generation immigrants, living in the USA. There's far, far fewer in Europe. I talk to, I play what they call football over here, soccer. And so I am around the young guys. Our veterans teams, we share the same, clubhouse and everything as the young guys. And, I got to tell you, their attitude is a little bit scary, even to me. I'm alt-right and stuff, and I'm listening to these guys talk, and I'm thinking, good Lord, they're going to be breaking out the armbands any day now. There's even different shirts that basically have specific nationalist meanings. A lot of you probably don't even know about a lot of the people don't even know about things like I think it's the Sons of Odin, or Soldiers of Odin, and they don't know anything about the Ultras. Did you know at a football game, I think it was in Serbia, one team had one black player, and the team showered him with incessant racist abuse the entire game until he broke down into tears. And then afterwards, the club officials were piling on him for flipping them the bird. Can you imagine that in the NFL? Okay, so don't tell me that Europe is finished. Europe is in much better shape and much readier to do something about the invasion than the USA is. And so, the other thing is that Europe has to be harsher about it because what you said, the African population bomb. Africa is we're going to see horrors in Africa that neither you nor me can imagine. And there's 2 reasons. Number 1, Africa already can't feed itself. Countries that used to be able to feed themselves, like Nigeria, no longer can do so. And their populations are exploding to the point that they cannot possibly be settled in Europe. At the same time, the Chinese are going to be moving millions of people into Africa. And you remember, with the Chinese, you're dealing with a group of people who didn't hesitate to kill 50 million of their own people. And they don't even regard Africans as being properly human. Hell, they don't regard us as being properly human for the most part. They're looking for natural resources. And so China is now colonizing Africa, even as the African population is exploding, and even as the Muslim population in Africa is extremely aggressive. And so when you put those things together, you have a tremendously explosive mix. You have you have the seeds for industrial scale horror that makes the Nazis and the Soviets look like pikers. And so, all the stuff that we're seeing now, the sob stories about, the refugees from Syria, and as we know, none of them are, very few of them are from Syria. It's in Africa, but the Africans are going to attempt to escape to Europe, and they're not going to be permitted to do so because of what's already happened. People are not going to be willing to tolerate it. And so, what we're already seeing is that Sweden, and keep in mind, Sweden has reached a burning point. Sweden has reached a point where it's about ready to explode, and the immigrant population is considerably smaller as a percentage of the population than Hispanics and Mexicans in the USA. And so, right now, the Europeans aren't doing anything because their governments are cracking down hard on them. They're silencing them, with the help of Facebook. And so, their governments are all women and that sort of thing, but their governments are on the verge of being overthrown. And the God Emperor is part of that. That's why the EU is terrified of them. I don't think you realize how close Europe is to splitting up. The Dutch are looking at getting rid of the euro. Marine Le Pen is now running against a very damaged establishment character who just described French colonialism as a crime against humanity. So that's going over really well with the French. And the other thing you have to keep in mind about the French is that we as Americans tend to think of them as being very weak and whatever, but they're actually much harsher than Americans are. They're much less merciful than Americans are. There was a situation in, I think it was the 70s, and the Moroccans, or the Algerians, rioted in Paris. The chief of police arrested and handcuffed dozens of the rioting Algerians. Guess what they did with them? Anybody know? They threw them into the Seine with their handcuffs on. Can't swim very well that way. They all drowned. Of course, there was a big media outroar. So they investigated. And they gave the chief of police a medal for maintaining order. Okay? Now, obviously, the French that are currently in government aren't like that, right? Because it's the socialists, the feckless ones, the ones who have been pushing for it. But I've got to tell you, like I said, I was in Paris. I was at the Giardino Nelson Mandela, and it was deeply ironic to be standing there. And there were a bunch of Africans. It was almost all Africans on the grass, just hanging out, listening to music, talking, whatever. And there were 4 white French policemen wearing body armor, carrying machine guns, standing on an elevated platform, keeping an eye on all of them. Okay, how hard would it be for them to turn that situation into something that was conclusive? Not very. It's going to happen. It is absolutely going to happen because that's what happens in history. It's ugly, it's terrible, it's horrible, and apparently it's necessary because all of these idiots on the left insisted on forcing multiculturalism on the West. And so the only way the West is going to survive is basically some form of, some form of massive ethnic cleansing. It's not going to be the first time it's happened in Europe. It's not going to be the first time it's happened in the USA. And so, civic nationalism is a total failure. And so this isn't something that we should celebrate, but it is something that we should understand and accept. Birth rates will go up eventually. Birth rates are irrelevant. People keep saying, oh, the birth rates are down. There are more Germans today. There's more white Englishmen today than there were when the British ruled the world. Okay? So it's not all about numbers in the way people understand. The other thing that is going to happen, unfortunately, most likely, is that you're going to see some levels of genetic warfare. When you're dealing with identity politics, when you're dealing with this kind of war, people are going to invent new weapons. Well, if you want to get rid of a certain population, what's the most effective way to do so? No, not eugenics, genetic warfare. Stuff that is targeted at specific gene patterns in the population. Technology already exists. It's just the delivery vehicles that are iffy. But in wartime, the focus on the technology drives those things. We went from, flying propeller planes to jet planes over the course of World War II. We're going to see the same thing. I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea. All I know is that it's probably going to be historically messy and historically ugly, and the elites who are thinking that they're going to survive or profit from this are almost surely wrong. Europeans are, it's not a secret that Europeans are arming themselves. The senior general, or colonel I think it was, in the Swiss army told the Swiss population to gun up because war is coming to Europe. Americans are gunning up at a historic rate. Everybody knows it's coming on some level. We don't want to believe it. We don't want to imagine this. But we know it's happening. Look at the war look at the war that's going on in Ukraine right now. There's war everywhere. The Swiss are different from the rest of mainland Europe, but not very much. There's far more guns in Italy than you would ever imagine. Out in the countryside, everybody has rifles and whatnot. There was actually an attack on a refugee camp in southern Italy, and they went down and fired on the refugees. You don't read about that in the newspaper. But so again, this isn't something that I'm happy about. This isn't something anyone should be happy about. But I'm not angry at the people who are rising up to defend their nations, to defend the West, to defend their people. I'm putting the blame where it belongs. I'm putting the blame on the left that welcomed diversity. I'm putting the blame on the left that welcomed tolerance. I'm putting the blame on the left that forced multiculturalism on a world, and they are the ones who will be responsible for all of this bloodshed. And to get back to what we were talking about before with Trump, what we were talking about before with Trump is that he is beginning to act. He said now is the time to act. And he's doing it. He's acting. He's now bypassing the judges. He's bypassing the courts. Here's the thing. All of the framework, all of the legal framework, the law is bullshit. There is no law. Law is the restrictions that we as a society mutually agree upon. So what happens is we agree upon those things, and then suddenly the left starts playing games with it. And they start saying, well, we can do this, but you can't do that. Well, they have annihilated the social contract. They have annihilated the concept of the rule of law. And now, do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. Everyone now only can answer to their individual conscience. And so it's going to, there's a time for peace and there's a time for war. And, technically I'm quoting W. Somerset Maugham. The proper quote would be, do what thou wilt with due regard for the policeman around the corner. But yes, we are in very, very difficult times. The globalists are, they think they're close to achieving their agenda, but they're not. It's going to fall apart. It always does. They think that they're going to transform humanity into gods. They think that they're going to rival the Creator God and reject Jesus Christ, and they're not. I mentioned last night, somebody said, oh, but Christianity is dying here, dying there, blah, blah, blah. I just said, hey, it took 11 Christians, 11 followers of Christ took over the world. And so, what I think is amazing is the way that Donald Trump, a man who, frankly, I would have been shocked if you said that he'd ever read the Bible, his language shows his seriousness. His language shows that he understands the importance of the nation turning to God and turning to the truth and rejecting this evil global agenda that is all about making God of man. And so, these are scary times for a lot of us. But here's the thing. The more you read history, the more you understand that this is nothing new. It's amazing to see how many times societies and nations and civilizations have been through this. But keep in mind, nothing's guaranteed. Western civilization is not a given. The left thinks it's a given. It's not a given. The Mayans had a great civilization. It fell. The Aztecs had a pretty awful civilization, but it fell. And so, if Western civilization is going to survive, it's going to depend upon us. It's going to depend upon us turning to God, turning to the truth, and acting. Now is the time to act. That's what the God Emperor said. And he was right. And it's time to stop playing along with the anti-civilizational people. It's time to stop playing along with the discivilizational. That's right. When good men do nothing, evil triumphs. Good men have done nothing for 50 years, for 60 years. They've done nothing. And that's why the USA is falling apart. That's why Europe is falling apart. And so what I'll leave you tonight with this note. Now is the time to act. Anyhow, have a good evening and have a good weekend. And yeah, I'm really delighted to see how many of you are using Infogalactic News. And so, you know, and here's something else you can do. Pray for everybody. Pray for Milo. Pray for Trump. Pray for Cernovich. Pray for me. Because even if you can't, you know, give to this, can't give to that, whatever, the one thing that you can always do is get down on your knees on behalf of someone else. So, have a good evening. We'll talk to you soon.